There's a hell of a lot of controversial politics going on about the Norman conquest. I didn't actually even know about how, to be honest, I didn't even know that much about the Godwinsons and that there was Tostwig Godwinson who ended up going to the north, to Northumbria, was an earl. And he actually assisted with the battle at Stamford Bridge, just to the east side of York. And apparently there was loads of politics, strange politics going on between this Godwinson family and whether or not it had already been arranged or planned for Normanisation of England. Anyway, York had been fought over multiple times, actually established by the Vikings and then taken back again. I mean, if they were thinking about basically teaming up with the Normans and building castles and fortifying the country, generally more fortresses and churches and things like that to protect it as well from any further invasions with the aid of the Normans. There's that as well, but the actual battle itself, this is I know there was quite a few different battles within England anyway, but I mean any time, if it was that easy for the Normans to take over them, apparently with loads of skirmishes in Scotland, why didn't the Scots just take over England or the Welsh? And how do the Welsh defend themselves so well? Um, if the Welsh could defend themselves so well and just stay there where they were with the borders for so long, why wasn't that resilience figured into the whole country in general? You know, what I think. This is what been thinking. This is just one thought out of. There's many different thoughts and dynamics that you can possibly have, but if Howard Godwinson had gone up to Stamford Bridge with an army, legitimately, and there was a war. I mean, there's evidence of a battle taking place, right? And we've got evidence of recorded casualties. If he did go up there and have a battle and end up defending York, but it was partly a family feud as well as a invasion from the Vikings at the same time, which is kind of ridiculous. But the thing is, if there was 5,000 casualties, and then if the leaders were killed and then the remaining, kind of ran off or dispersed or were missing, this is the thing, right? If you've got, apparently the army is made up of these housecarls and proper soldiers, and then you've got your cavalry, but then there's like a peasant section as well who only have pitchforks and so forth. If you've got an army, right, this is just some things I've been thinking about. There's probably loads of other factors as well, but I thought this is worth mentioning as a theory of many theories. If you've got a certain amount of forces and you go up to Stamford Bridge and have a battle, and there's casualties on both sides, but you win, so you lose some people, but you beat the other army who suffers more losses, right? And then their main leaders are killed, and the rest either run away or are dispersed or whatever. Basically, the force is disrupted. I don't know what happened to all the ships, whether they went and destroyed them all or what, but probably seized them. I don't know. What happens to the ones who ran off? Did they get back on a couple of the ships and go back, or did Howard Godwinson? You don't know all the details, do you? How do you sort out an army when you've beaten your opponents? Do they go to the coast and destroy all the ships, or seize them, or take them, or what? We don't know. But you'd have thought that if it was a proper force, right? You'd have thought that if you just won a battle, even if you're very tired and exhausted, there's usually people coming to clear up the battle and the bodies and so forth, even if it's not the army itself that's done all the fighting, even if you calling the local population to help out. You'd have thought that there were quite a lot of weapons being recovered, or decent weapons, right? Even if they're not your preferred weapons like these, Danish hand axes. But apparently, the thing is that the Vikings and Danes are from, it's, these housecarls are all Danish anyway, and the tradition of those Danish hand axes, which they liked, as well as swords and so forth. But the thing is, right, whenever there's been a battle and you win, even if there's been some losses on both sides, and if some of them have ran away, then there's gonna be quite a significant number of weapons, right? Now, if you've been helped out by peasants who have only got pitchforks and things to use, then you'd have thought that the weapons that are left over from your defeated enemy, right, would actually be able to be taken up and used, and would replace quite a lot of the rubbish weapons like, pitchforks or whatever the peasants were using, right? So there would have been some weapons. And then also the fact that after that battle they got called down to the coast because there was this invading force in Hastings, right? So you'd have thought that, and this is the thing, if William the Conqueror had true opposition to his conquest, and if it was a legitimate conquest, but there was lots of battles going on and fighting over the rest of the country, like in Lancashire or Wales or wherever, he didn't just there was still a resistance, right, to his taking over, and all those people who were resistant to his takeover, why didn't they, if it was that of a serious invasion or whatever, why didn't they all go down then? Why didn't he send out, give notice? And also, you would have thought that if they were that opposed, they would have gone down then, and they didn't seem to have done. And even if the army was depleted and exhausted, surely the ones that are left have got decent weapons. You'd have thought that there was some kind of percentage of, amount of people lost, an amount of assets gained from the other army, where it would have actually worked out that pretty much everyone was actually well armed, I would have thought, rather than not well armed. And even if more people were, this is the thing, if there was Lancastrian opposition to the Norman conquest and in Cumbria and so forth, with what? Not peasants with pitchforks. Clearly some forces that the other earls had got, why weren't they employed, or were they already, they clearly weren't employed when they went down to Hastings, because, it seems ridiculous. The whole thing seems rather strange affair, and the whole fact that this Tostig Godwinson was actually already allied with them, it seems, the whole thing seems strange, and the timing for it, as if it's meant to convince the people in the country who were opposed to it that it actually happened when maybe it didn't, and that's why maybe they didn't call them all, because if they were pursuing Norman policies and welcoming kind of the Normans in, and they had to do some kind of sort of charade for it all, then you wouldn't call absolutely everyone down to help, would you? Because they're the ones who are going to be resistant to it anyway and not want it to happen. So if Harold Godwinson won in Stamford Bridge, and if they won the battle, and then they recovered resources of weapons, right, which really would, if you've lost people and but you've also recovered a weapon asset, including your own casualties, and you're actually going to recover not only all your own weapons, but you're going to have spare weapons from the defeated enemies. So there aren't going to be any, I wouldn't have thought there would be that many peasants left with pitchforks, because maths would surely dictate that everyone then would have been fully armed, just through maths. Because the weapon, the loss of people who didn't have weapons on your side, and the gain of weapons from the opponent would equal that your army wouldn't have any crap weapons anymore. None. Everyone would be fully armed. Even if they weren't experienced with weapons, there's no one on this planet who was an inexperienced peasant who would say no to a Danish hand axe and a sword rather than a pitchfork, right? No one on this planet, even if they weren't experienced in battle, they're not going to say no to some Viking armor either. So it doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it makes sense. And then if you're going to have some resistance, the thing is, this Togwig Godwinston's been faffing around in the north trying to get maybe what I'm starting to think now is that these Lancastrian and Cumbrian opposers, if they are, maybe Godwinson was up there, maybe he hadn't fallen out with his family, maybe he was up there trying to persuade them to come around, right? And they weren't really happy with it, right? So maybe you would have thought that, you know, if the Godwinsons as a family, you know, what they're going to do with these northern people, well, you could think, well, if they could have a try at them with asking the Norwegians, right, or whatever, the Vikings to come back over, because that's actually going to help to destroy the opposition to the to destroy your northern opposition to the Normans coming over, right, and it being taken over by William the Conqueror. You want to take out the north opposition, so that would be a good idea to bring the Norwegians over. And apparently Godwinson wasn't that popular in the north. But then you think, well, why would, if that's the case, why would Harold Godwinson come up and defend the country, right? But if he did, then everyone would be say, oh yeah, you know, he's here, he tried to help us and defend us. Then they would be on the side of the Godwinsons, right? Against the Godwinsons protected us from the Vikings, right? And Harold came up, and then because why would Togstad Godwinson be coming over with Vikings? Well, because the northern resistance to this whole idea of the Norman conquest thing. But if that's the case, then, you know, why would Godwinson kill his own brother or whatever? But we don't know exactly what happened. But the thing is, for sure, if he was opposed to it, this is the thing though. If Harold Godwinson truly was opposed to the Norman conquest and Hastings, right, battle, why didn't he, and he'd just beaten this opposition, why didn't he go down to the south with all these people who were apparently, you know, claiming to be opposed the whole way through and fighting against it, while the Normans actually did come over and go through the next number of years before they did the Domesday Survey, right? Well, it must have been because you didn't want them to help. You didn't want them to help. Because if they'd have helped to then it wouldn't, they would have beaten them, wouldn't they? So they can't have gone down really with the intention to really want to try and win. Because firstly, you're not going to have anyone who isn't armed at that point, because you don't waste weapons and armour and resources when you've just gained assets from a defeated army. You use all those assets, right? And then you're going to put the word out to absolutely everyone, possibly even Welsh and all of the north. Now, if you say, well, everyone went there anyway to fight, but it doesn't make sense, though, does it? Because, what's this resistance? What even is this resistance? After the Battle of Hastings, there was, resistance for so many years in different areas and different northern leaders and earls or whatever resisting. There wouldn't be any resistance at all, would there? If they had have gone down with Godwinson, then it pretty much, there's something peculiarly odd about it. I think that the North weren't too keen about this Norman handover. And I think that the Godwinsons, it's sounding like there was some deal to be made, but not everyone was going for it. Now, did Tostig really truly fall out with his family and go up the North, or was he trying to sort the North's opposition out? But then he ends up with the Norwegians coming over against the North. So you'd have thought, well, why don't Harold Godwinson just leave them and let them, fight it out, right? But then they wouldn't. If he comes up and defends them, then it's kind of like, oh yeah, Godwinson's kind of like helped us. But then if he goes down south and gets defeated, then it's kind of like makes it look legitimate, doesn't it? Oh yeah, we've actually been defeated, rather than if they'd have just handed it over, then they might have really. Well, you see, if they'd have just handed it over, they might have been a big actual battle or fight, kind of civil war. So no, we're not handing it over, so have a fight about it. Because like, if the northern people are really opposed to it and they say, oh yeah, we're going to, it's going to go over anyway, you're going to have civil war, kind of a little bit like Oliver Cromwell, aren't you? Because you're going to think, oh, the northern people are happy about this. So what's going to happen is all your northern people who are opposed to it are going to actually fight with your southern people over why the southern people handing it over, right? But if you make it look like it's a legitimate invasion and your own country, like your own king's actually trying to oppose it and help it, then your own people aren't going to attack Godwinson, right? Because Godwinson is looking after us. But this is like they're wanting to build more churches, and generally the Christian religion is wanting to take over and establish itself and gain more ground. And we know that some of these have been over to see with the Pope anyway. There've been some meetings over there. So I think that it's a kind of a case of like a bit of a stage show. I mean, I think that some of it had to be real or whatever, or there was some conflict, but I think that they were trying to do something about the Northern Resistance anyway, with Tostig going over there. Even if maybe Tostig was siding with the North, so they didn't want to be taken over in a way, but why did he attack the North? Well, maybe he was going to legitimately kind of take it and then oppose his own brother to this Norman conquest. But this is like ultimately, I think not that many people talk about this particular battle. I think that this is probably more significant and political and complicated than the actual civil war with Oliver Cromwell. See, Oliver Cromwell gets quite a lot of there's a hell of a lot of debate and discussion, and it's a lot more well known, the English Civil War with Cromwell and the Roman invasion, the Romans. But Battle of Hastings, it's only like that battle. It's only like a place called Battle. They don't actually extrapolate the whole thing in the similar kind of way the Civil War. There's a lot more, the Civil War, there's a lot more interest in, what led up to it, and then, Charles and, all the different factors, the petitioning rights and various other different things, all the issues within the church of, the religious conflicts, and so for all these other different things. I actually think that we've got a lot less, the further back you go, the less records you've got, but except for the Romans who wrote a lot down, but I think that this whole issue with this Tostig Godwinson and faffing about up in the north, and then this Jorvik thing, being taken and multiple times and then taken back again, and then the whole fact that there was apparently some kind of deal or whatever existing, it all seems politically orchestrated in order to, I think, convince the people in the country who were opposed to it or not too keen on it. But the thing is, you see, if they were opposed to it and not keen on it before it happened, then surely they would have had a civil war, which was kind of like what Tostig is doing. Because Tostig Godwinson, it's not what when you actually look at it now, it's not actually just, the Vikings are invading, and this battle at Stamford Bridge, and and Godwinson made a fair way up the country. If there was an invasion of the Vikings turned up and they only got to Stamford Bridge, by the time Godwinson gets up there, they were going bloody slow. I'll tell you that, because he hadn't even got to York if it was Stamford Bridge. And the amount of time it takes them to inform Godwinson and get up there don't work out, does it? Because if you've got that much of an armed force turning up to invade, they're not just going to sit there and have an holiday on the beach and wait for him to get there, are they? They'd have been already at York, unless their objective was just to set up a camp and so forth, and not actually, they must have had enough forces to take York, because that was the intention. It doesn't all calculate right to me. Something odd about it, and it's not actually an invasion. It's actually it's more of a civil war than an invasion. It's definitely more of a civil war than an invasion. And if you see, there were two. Either Tostig could have been trying to take the north against his family and oppose these plans for the Norman conquest, but if he'd have had the Northerners with him, a lot more of the north of England, then surely they would have done it. But then you've got a huge civil war then. But if Godwinson's coming up to protect the country, then all the northern people aren't going to kick off against our own southern people, are they, right? So that it just, to me, it's, I can't see how he would have gone back down and lost if he legitimately wanted to win, because it just doesn't figure out. It does not figure out at all. Because you would have put word out to the Welsh. There was Welsh kings, and if the Welsh king, how do the Welsh kings even hold Wales? Why didn't how come they're all kind of cooperating, and they must have a status quo of, okay, this is going to stay Wales and these are Welsh kings, or the Welsh were really, if the Welsh were just tough enough to hold up Wales without this kind of like altruistic kind of agreement, oh, this is Wales anyway, and we're not interested in changing it from Wales, right? Without any proper muscle, if it's just like a religious and kind of like an agreement thing that but if Wales were holding Wales through physical power, not just through religious and status quo, then you'd have thought Wales wouldn't have been too happy about the Normans invading. So the whole thing just seems ridiculous, and the fact that I don't buy that any one single person. I don't buy that army came back down right after winning. Came back with one single person who was not fully armed with proper decent weapons and armor, even if they were peasants. Because even if they're not trained, it don't work out, does it? Because if you go up, you beat an army, you take some losses, right, and whatever losses you've taken, right, you're dropping off the number of people that are going to be carrying pitchforks, and then out of the people you beat, you recover some weapons. So whatever the percentage of people who go up who don't have weapons, right, and when that body is reduced but the availability of weapons increases, right, if you've got a body and some of them are armed and some of them have got crap weapons like peasant weapons, and the volume of that body reduces in size, right, then but you beat another force and you gain assets, then the assets are going to therefore increase, but in a smaller body. So you've got an increase of assets to a smaller body of people. So not one single person, even if they were tired and even if they were exhausted and even if they came back a smaller body, they were going to have better and more weapons. And if the North was truly opposed to it, they would have been picking up a hell of a lot of people. So I think that and all the people who supposedly were what we hear about were opposed to it. After leading up to Doomsday Book. So it just don't make sense to me. It don't work out right. And you say, well, maybe it happened so quick, and they didn't have time. But you wouldn't rush down there to get beaten, particularly if you're knackered. If you've just been in a battle and you won and you're tired, but then there's another invasion, right? Then, I mean, even if your family's down there and the sort of like the throne or the centre of the whole kind of Wessex kind of scene, it's better to get a stronger force, rather than rush into it. So it just doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think that they wanted everyone to go down and win. I think they wanted to go down and lose. And then say, we've been beaten, what a shame. Really unhappy about it. But there's someone else taking over, new king. And then that way, more people are going to accept it rather than, end up having some kind of... Otherwise, it's a kind of civil war, isn't it? You see, if... This is the thing, right? If Godwinson goes back down there, right, and let's say that they fought the Battle of Hastings, right, and let's say that they lost, but Godwinson was alive, right, and then let's say that he goes over to, they end up, if somehow he, hands the crown over, and then that means that he is subservient to William the Conqueror, right? And if Godwinson is alive and subservient to William the Conqueror, that means that it's a civil war, because then your country is against your country, because Godwinston is your own country and he's going to be against his own people, right? Which, if he's dead, then it's not a civil war, it's still an invasion, and the Normans are still fighting and invading, right? And then anyone who doesn't accept that, that's the resistance. But if it was Godwinston, right, with the Normans, then everyone's going to be like, what the fuck? And then they would probably have more resistance, because they think that, they're not happy about it. And you've got more people, there were a lot more people oppose it and not happy about it. Because, if he's dead, even though you haven't got anything to fight for, because it's kind of like, oh, well, it's already gone, hasn't it, really? Or maybe they were just really unruly, and, there was a lot going on. But with all these meetings with the Pope and so forth, it just seems there's something not right about it. And all the things that are happening now, the way that they're doing things now with this whole corporate business takeover, using mobile phones, TV shows, TV adverts in your own home to affect and influence people. And then any uprising or civil resistance, they start using, Putin is, they literally nuke Ukraine, to scare us all, scare everyone, which is basically like getting the people to accept it, accept the corporate, accept, consent, submit. That's all you see on these websites now. It's all accept, consent, submit. This is all legal, but it's not even our law. It's not our law. It's not the law of England. It's a corporate entity's law, corporate entity policies. It's not even government policies. And then you got Kamala Harris saying, and stop people saying this or that on YouTube, when they've already stopped it. They're already removing stuff that isn't even illegal. They've already got everyone to consent, submit, accept. They're already taking things down which lawfully should be up. And then you got Kamala Harris saying, no, it's really, not what's happening on there is not good. Well, no, because they're already enforcing further than what the law is. So it must be good for her, because she's got people obeying to things that aren't even the law. So I don't know what Kamala Harris is talking about. She's talking absolute tosh. What she's really saying is, what's left, what we haven't taken down unlawfully, whatever little bit of resistance is left, we want to get rid of that as well. So it really is a fight. It's illegal, because in England, this force that is doing it it's not our government. It's foreign businesses. It's effectively, it's almost like William the Conqueror, but it's Bill and Mark. Mark the Earl of Facebook, and Elon Musk. But Musk is, what's all this tosh about California is telling Musk not to fire his rockets over there when he's got a government contract, and he's the one who's bringing all the new tech in that's going to help all these big tech companies, all these Bluetooth AI Connect and all these other things, and his Optimus robots. It's probably worse now than this whole Tostig Godwinson and the north of England, versus his own family in the south. It's really a mashup. These tech barons, these tech gurus. It's just ridiculous. But we definitely, it's got to be illegal. The only thing that makes it lawful is meant to be that they're allies, that they're not our enemies. But I think they are our enemies. I think they are, because whenever a force is doing something that the people are opposed to, right? And we are opposed to it because we're telling our government, excuse me, look, right, if Putin, right? No, well, let me try and think of someone who's an ally or whatever. So, like, look at India, right? If India were meant to be allies, right? But if they turned up and they started bringing loads and loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of people over and started doing loads of businesses, and it was more identifiable that, and started making laws in their businesses, in their restaurants and businesses, which were completely different to what we have in this country, right? And then when you use their services, you say, oh no, this is the law. Even like for employment and things like that. Like employment law in England, we've got employment rules, employment law, right? Right, this, you've got the right to, all the employment rights and laws, fair dismissal and all that, right? If Rishi Sunak, for example, just started buying loads and loads and loads of businesses and things, and there's loads and loads of Indian people started coming over, like at Hastings, and bought the whole town, and then built loads of restaurants and things like that everywhere that had like Indian law in, and anyone who worked there, they just said you've got to consent, submit, accept these employment rules, not the rules of the English government, right? You'd be like, just a minute, what's going on here, right? And then like you started, till you got the whole South Coast, and then all the restaurants, all the hotels, all the printers and screen printers and repair car garages, all the companies all had Indians working in them, but they were all having these policies which were like Indian law from the country of India, not English law. And when you went into the restaurant, you go consent, submit, accept, and all the people who work there employed, if they weren't, if they get some people from our country employed there, but they say consent, submit, accept, you'd be like, just a minute, this is not the laws of this country. Well, you got to accept our laws, right? You'd be like, you'd sort of be just going, just a minute, what's actually happening here, right? But the thing is, you couldn't say, is this an invasion? We'll say, no, because India are our allies, they're our friends. But this is, yeah, exactly, but this is England, and this is what the law is. Well, no, we have to submit and consent and accept Indian law now. We don't mind Indian people coming here, but now you're getting us to consent, submit, accept to Indian law, right? That's the whole point in protecting this country is to protect its, economy, its laws and its customs, right? Now, because they're allies, we're not allowed to say it's an invasion, right? Because our government is friends with them, like doing handshakes. No, these are our friends. We're not an armed conflict with them. We've come to a certain diplomatic agreements. Well, just a minute. Your diplomatic agreements are contrary to our laws, right? Now, at what point can we say to the army, just a minute, is this an invasion, a friendly invasion, an allied invasion of our own country? Or, right, is it a war which is not being fought with guns, not being fought with tanks? But it seems to be that the government are the ones who decide, these are our enemies now, because, but what is an enemy? Your country sends a diplomat, right? He talks to another country. If you're neutral, right, you're not at war with them, and you're not necessarily their friends, trading, right? And the diplomat works things out with them. We'll come to an agreement where we'll cooperate together, right? We'll trade with you, you trade with us, right? That's cooperation. If they don't cooperate and they say, no, we're not going to, right, then, they don't agree with each other, then they might get weapons. Now, this is the thing, that America is sending weapons, but they're not fighting Putin. We're not. America aren't directly attacking Putin, but they're letting the Ukrainians attack him, right? And providing weapons, right? Which is, there is something illegal about what is going on. There's something illegal about it, and it's just putting your finger on it. What's illegal about it? And I think that our government are encouraging and welcoming a friendly invasion, which seeks to undermine our laws, even override them, and the invaders have got some very cool, novel, funky equipment, which we kind of like. It's almost like when the Chinese came over and they had all those opium dens, and like in Sherlock Holmes, and they've got a lot of the peers were getting addicted to heroin, or a lot of the aristocrats or whatever were going to these opium dens, and the Chinese, and they're just zonked out or whatever, And that's similar to what's happening with all the takeaways and the diabetes. If you get a Chinese restaurant in every village and an Indian restaurant in every village, and you also got our own fish and chips, which aren't helping us, you're causing this everyone to generally, get unhealthy and eat unhealthier. Diabetes and cancers and so forth. Looking back now, maybe there's always been, it's clear that there's been lots of migration into this country, whether it's, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, or whatever, Normans, Romans. That doesn't necessarily mean that, the government have to say, oh, it's great, we're always getting invaded all the time, like, we'll have some more of this, right? It's... That seems to be what they're kind of doing, But I think the thing what happened with the Normans is they said, okay, we're going to keep all the laws of Edward the Confessor. We're going to keep these, and we're going to keep the ancient customs. We know that, there's a load of Vikings over here in Danelaw, and there's been, and they're absorbed into us, and we know that we've got the Welsh, and we know that we have the Romans over, we know we've got the Scots, we know, but they didn't say, right, we'll erase everything and start a new... In fact, even when the Romans came over, the Romans were only really building the roads and trading and raising revenue and taxes. They didn't actually... I think they did remove the Druid administration and the religion, but I don't think... There were still the kings in place, so there was still Celtic law, even though I think they had Roman courts and Roman law for the Romans. I'm pretty sure they still had... they still retained some of the ancient customs, because they still had the rulers in place. Well, that's the custom, to still have the kings, right? So there seemed to be a point to keeping the laws of Edward the Confessor. We've got these laws, we've got these customs, this is what defines this country. They could have said, no, we're going to scrap them, but they didn't, they kept them. Right, even after all the different migrations, they kept the laws and the customs. So, and they even made it so they can't be undone, they can't be repealed, like in perpetuity. They can't, and they must have decided that it was a good idea, even after all these different things that had happened. So, I don't like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. Well, you see, look at Nick Clegg. Nick Clegg's with Mark. Just like, Tostig Godwinson is with the Viking invaders. Tostig Godwinson is fighting with the Viking invaders coming over for York. Well, I don't think Nick Clegg has been expelled from England. He's been sent on a mission with Mark, and it's consent, submit, accept. They're actually changing people's attitude through the social media, which is it's much more of an influence you can have over people's conduct and behaviour than sending in an army or military force. I think that what is happening is illegal because all these, and when I've actually looked at some of these policies, they're actually unlawful because they've got to comply with the laws of the country, and they're actually not. They're actually giving themselves that they're claiming that they've got sort of privileges like corporate privileges, but the corporate privileges cannot give them. Well, they're actually giving themselves that. They're not actually being given by the government. The government haven't given them the privileges because what they've done is they've written their own privileges into their own policy, which actually is unlawful in our law. Our law says, oh, no one can do this and no one can do that, because it goes into criminal law as well. The thing is, the policies are kind of making out that they're allowed to be criminals, which they can't. That's actually illegal, a lot of it. So it's criminal. We need to get some. This is the thing. No one's got any money, big money, to get some big prosecutions. We need to prosecute some of these big companies for illegal policy. They're getting people to consent to things which are illegal. There's got to be a part of the military of England which is meant to protect its country and its laws and its customs, as well as protect it from armed forces. There's a part of the army which is there's actually something to protect, right? And I think that because of some of these companies have got policies which are illegal, and the nature of what is being done is actually a remote invasion, because it's actually, what it's doing is it's getting an entire population of people to consent, submit and accept an alien country's laws, even if they're allies. They can be allies, but they're not our country. America isn't England. Even if America are our allies, it's a different country, right? But yeah, it's getting us to accept, consent, submit to all these effective policy laws which aren't our law. And what's happening is our government kind of are encouraging and welcoming it, because really they want to change our laws, but we'd be resistant to it. Now, they can't change our laws until they've got used to us, being like that. So it's like a proxy invasion, but not with I think it's illegal because a lot of these companies are not letting you use their services unless you consent, submit, accept to something that's not your customs in your country or your law. Because the law is meant to be there to govern companies and make companies are meant to have policies so that they provide for law and apply the laws of this country. If you start a company, right, you can't just do what you want. You've got to do what the law says. And when your customers come in, this is what employment law is, right? That's the point. Employment law in England. But when you've got a different employment law in America, right, but then when that company says, oh, well, we're going to put this into a policy and get all the English staff to consent, submit, accept, you're actually voluntarily agreeing to work under American law. Now, the problem is if there's a conflict with the English law, a contradiction, right? Or even when that policy, seeing that we're not actually in America, we're in another country, they're even writing laws that aren't even legal, they're not lawful in the country where they're in. I'm quite sure that this is a war, but it's like a friendly one. It's a friendly war where almost kind of, instead of soldiers coming over with armed weapons and guns, the military does operations which are like completely computer operations, take down a satellite or whatever. And this is when you get the FBI and the CIA, which is covert operations, getting people, agents, people, all this to cooperate with, their overseas operations and what are they up to? Seizing planes from Venezuelan presidents and so forth, because he didn't pay for them. Policing the world, right? But policing the world to whose laws? Policing what? I mean, America, America have got their own laws, but in South America, they've got their own laws. But what America are doing now is, if South American presidents aren't even following their own laws, what America are doing is America are actually getting involved they're actually trying to be a police force for other countries' laws. Saying, like a referee or something, but not in their own game. Like, the Venezuelan president broke the law or whatever. He bought a plane from Africa, illegal, so we're going to seize it. Well, they're getting involved in other people's business enforcement, but the laws in all those other countries are different. But they're kind of like getting involved almost in other people's business. But more than that, they're actually. I won't mind if it was American laws, but these corporate entities now, it's not it. They're coming up with stuff that isn't law of country, and this is where Kamala Harris is trying to get in with this whole social media thing. And even some of these senators have said, these media companies are very, very powerful. Well, I don't know whether he's joking or not, because they're the ones who are meant to govern them and regulate them and set the laws for them. But what the problem is that it's this kind of like cross-country operation. You got a big social media company having a big impact, and a foreign company accepts submit consent. And I really think that's the truth behind China, how they've managed to get all these Chinese people under these social point systems and so forth. I don't think the China government just came up with it and said, we'll put our own citizens under this. I think that it's all the social media platforms and so forth, kind of like how they're doing it to us, how Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and Elon Musk and Bill Gates are doing it to us here, and there's some resistance to it and a little bit of what's going on here, right? But in China, they've managed to do it a lot more widely and strategically, and even, really over the leaders over there, to an extent where they've got, this whole Tony Blair, teaching governments how to run their government better and doing all these government packages with all, like a pop-up book government, like pop-up, like Windows installation pack for the whole government. We can help you run your government a lot more efficiently, like the West does. Here's government XP or whatever, and then they set it up, and then that's it. And then Tony Blair's just the guy who, when you get a guy coming round to your business and, basically charges you, £20 million for installing Windows and setting it up for you, and then just giving you the briefing of how to run it. Tony Blair's like, I've got a new government package for you, just install this in your country, and then, I'll just, I'll charge you, £10 billion just to install it for you, even though you could have just pushed like next 10 times by yourself, and then I'll just give you a little bit rundown. I'll, in fact, pay me another 20 billion, and I'll get some, we'll give you some guidance, some staff training as well, how to run the program. This is why I'm not into Blair and his Fabians. But it's too late now. I think it's too late because the effects have already set in. And meanwhile, some people love it. This whole X Factor commercial radio, It's just they're lapping it up, that they're soaking it up, they're just like, la la la. They've got a certain amount of people happy and content in their La La Land, which is effectively a little bit like that BBC Doctor Who episode when they've got the dot bubble and dot episode or whatever, dot off or whatever in the kind of bubble thing. I really don't know what to think about this television, because which side they're playing, because they're playing one side saying, they're doing episodes of certain programs where this is all bad, but then they're doing they've got other programs that are just like getting people to sing along, like Rachel Reeves, just like put the earphones on and just go la 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 la, more of this, which is not good. The strategy on it is just, and now they've got AI thrown in, and they've got people liking the convenient. Oh, this is convenient, Well, convenient for who? Not convenient for free thought and free opinion and people trusting each other. Wouldn't it be great in a country where you didn't need, if you, some animals are constantly paranoid, like little mice, they need to be constantly paranoid of prey, right? It's a bad model that you need to habitually lock your door, put your mobile phone PIN numbers and all these things. Don't trust anyone. Meanwhile, be more polite to people and smiling, but having more and more and more security and not really trusting anyone. The trusting people to have like Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, right, who are very smiley and happy, but every single thing is locked. But so why be happy? I mean, if you trusted no one, and if no one was to be trusted, right, it's rather ridiculous. Because you're like, oh, hello, sir, how are you? Oh, yes, very nice, Prime Minister. Yes, but, you're locking everything. If you had a house of people and you trusted no one, it's like David Beckham, about who locks every single door in the house or whatever, right? But, now we've got these laws that make people be very polite to each other and very nice. But, every single thing has got a data lock and, you can't go through a door without an eyeball scan. It's so, what's the politeness of it for? To make it pleasant that, you don't trust anyone. Whereas the opposite of that is, if you've got a problem with someone, you shouted at them, or you have an argument or a debate or a dispute, but then after it was over, but you didn't lock anything, which means that, you trusted people, but if they did something wrong, you shouted at them or whatever. There's got to be some kind of compromise, and we know that particularly through the early 1800s, the Luddites started smashing the machines up because the government refused to raise the minimum wage, and there was a lot of petitioning, but a lot of smashing things up, and then there was a lot of crime went through the roof, which they noted in Hansard, and then Parliament burned down, but then Robert Peel's got his police force, and actually he was the one who told them to go set the fire going, and Denman, who was kind of a Whig and for the rights and so forth, was falling out with the king, didn't speak to him. It seems to me, I'm pretty certain that Denman and the King burned down Parliament, to be honest, because they were opposed to Denman, and he was like he wasn't actually that into money and profits. Apparently, he didn't make that much money, so they say. I don't know if it's true or not, but he didn't make loads and loads and loads of money out of his law work. He was more bothered about the laws in the country, which is the totally opposite to all these big corporate entities, And then they say, oh, we're going to make all of the laws and everything available to everyone, but yet they don't save the petitions. which is kind of rather ridiculous. They don't preserve them until 1947 or something, and that's after, you see. Then remember in the 1800s there was a lot of drug problems, heroin and cocaine and things like that. So by the late 1800s they banned that. There's all the drugs as well. And then they created the Labour Party. And through those 1800s they'd actually been removing all of the juries from the civil courts. So they couldn't really oppose all the building and planning and everything on a jury. And on the lower magistrates court level, when all this crime went up and more people were getting prosecuted because they refused to raise the minimum wage, they took the juries out of the magistrates court. So people were getting convicted by the judges, not the peers, unless they wanted to appeal it to the Crown Court, which probably some people wouldn't have done. And then culminating with the banning of the drugs, and then you've got the suffragettes kicking off about women's right to vote. Now, women lawfully could vote through the Bill of Rights, but they just didn't because it wasn't kind of like the tradition or fashionable, right? But I don't know whether they had women on juries. I think so. I don't know whether women could be jurats or not. But I think that I'll have to check. This is something I need to check. But I think they could be on juries if it was a random jury at the assizes or whatever. We'll check if it was men or not. I think it might have been women, or it might have at least been women on juries. And they had the right to petition, because the suffragettes were petitioning for the right to vote for government to be in Parliament. But that jury thing's important, because if women could be on juries through the 1800s, it would be better than voting. Because, I mean, if you've got someone in Parliament who's deciding what the laws are going to be and making and changing the laws, the thing is, when you're using law in day-to-day life, well, the happenings of the country, if you've got juries deciding civil cases, and also you could planning matters. This is another thing. These planning permissions. I've been reading some of the books on the model for the local council, particularly in Scotland as well. And you can actually appeal to a local council authority. They're meant to assign a committee to appeal a decision, or you can actually, instead of having the council hear it, you're meant to be able to the High Court, the assizes, is meant to actually be, it is the higher level of the local council. The local council say, oh, you can only have a judicial review of something, but you can, and remember, you would have had a jury on there as well, right? But you can actually have it to there in the first place, rather than have it at the council. And you can also petition, you can petition Parliament about council matters, that's for sure, instead of having it heard by the council. And there are certain things that they're called juries in for, to decide council matters, like for some of the things like of the roads and certain uses of local money for certain projects and things like that. You can have a jury called in. I think it was only meant to be final if you didn't opt to go to the higher courts and you just opted to have that court. But then there was a possible appeal. But there was ways to you can petition Parliament instead, or you could actually have it go to a higher jurisdiction and have a jury in at random. So it's not the aldermen, the councillors who decide, it's actually a jury. That's what it says in the model for how the council was run. which is kind of where we've got a little bit misconstrued at the moment. You can still petition Parliament. They've got a petitions committee. You can petition about anything to that committee. You can petition about local council matters. I know you can, because they wouldn't have the committee. It's there for anything you want and any subject you want. And also, you're challenging the council if they broke the law or didn't follow procedure as well. Once you've opted to go with the council, and then you can appeal it to a committee of 3. There definitely was the alternative option to go higher, and the courts, the circuit courts, are actually higher than the council. This is the thing that they've got it at the moment, where the council is nothing to do with the courts, but yet they use the courts to enforce fines and this and this and that. Actually, the matters that the council are hearing and the councillors are voting on, you can actually have those decisions done by the court, the actual decision itself, from the start. And this is the thing with the Stonehenge project, which is a real mashup, because you've got parts of the project approved by the council and parts that the government put through. But there was already a petition to the government, and the government withdrew it, right? And there is actually, you're meant to be able to appeal a council decision, but you've got a right to go above the council. But the thing is, the government is above the council anyway. Parliament. And the fact that the government withdrew the project, why wouldn't the plannings be quashed? And you don't even need a reason. In fact, the reason for having the planning quashed is that the government withdrew the project. Usually you have to have a good argument or a good reason, to get something overturned or quashed. So if the government pulled the funding for the project, it means they're not doing it. So what will be the point in having the planning? There won't be any point in having the planning. So the reason you're arguing to overturn the council orders is that the government just withdrew the project. And you don't even need to make an expensive case for that. I mean, all you need is just one piece of evidence, which is just very simple, which is the confirmation that the government have withdrawn. If you show the confirmation that the government have withdrawn, then you say that the government have withdrawn. So can we get these quashed? Because what's the point in them, right? That's it, really. But really, that should be done by the government anyway, because that's what that big petition was asking for to the government, with over 200 or 400,000 signatures, or 200,000 signatures. I think there was 2 petitions. Anyway, the point of this discussion now is all about that there are certain things which really are still true and to effect in law, principles, bases which exist, like the Petitions Committee at Parliament, which are being ignored and disregarded by local governments. And also you've got a lot of these companies and entities which are lying about, they're getting us to consent, submit and accept everything that they're doing. It's almost like the local council's getting you to consent, submit and accept that they've made a decision and it's final. When it's not, you can get an appeal from a committee, or they're getting you to submit, consent and accept that they did a consultation and they don't have to go with what the results of it are, right? Just consent to that, submit to it, accept to it, when that's not actually the case. Particularly when people didn't really want the council to make the decision in the first place. And some of these decisions can actually go to the courts for the decision itself. You can have it in a court with a jury, but they've taken the juries out of the civil courts, which is kind of ridiculous. Because when the assize comes round, There's many here criminal and civil matters. So we've kind of like what's happened with the local councils is that you've got like these political parties now that have these councillors. A political party is like a private group or organisation. It's effectively like a company or a business, right? That you consent, submit and accept to. And they've got these councillors, but the councillors are meant to be selfless, which is impossible. You can't be advocates of a company and advocates for your electors at the same time, but the electors are like, oh yeah, we consent, submit, accept to Labour Party policy. That's effectively it, but yet you've got an independent right to say something, but they don't want you to exercise that right. They're effectively trying to get you to sort of like relinquish, not act, kind of like, consent, submit, accept, just agree to what we were doing. You do have juries in these certain council things, or we're supposed to, you're meant to have, or you can have it, and petition Parliament as well. And I think the thing is that, well, there's nothing in modern law which is taking away the right to petition Parliament, and in fact, local government legislation has got these. The local government legislation has got a method for a local referendum, and you need to get 5% of an electorate, but it doesn't say which electorate. It could be, a ward or or what, right? And if you get that figure, you can ask the Secretary of State for a local referendum, but the Secretary of State grants it, and then that local referendum can overturn council orders and all kinds of things, right? Which it's an actual referendum voting. It's not even a jury in court, it's an actual referendum. But the Secretary of State has to grant it. Now in Wiltshire, what about these council orders that have been passed? The council orders which have been passed in Wiltshire, effectively, there's nothing to stop people having a referendum about them, right? But the Secretary of State grants it. And it's the Secretary of State who's going to uphold the funding for the whole project. So why doesn't he just say, oh, well, why don't you have a referendum about overturning those council orders? But why doesn't he just overturn them? He's actually got the power to do it anyway. Or a committee of the council. I'm sure a committee of the council can do it. But this is the thing, Parliament has got a jurisdiction to put an order through to result for a resolution for those. I don't know why people are paying £40,000 in the Stonehenge Alliance project to go to the Supreme Court to try challenge those when you don't need 50 grand, because now that the government have pulled the project, what's the point in having approved planning? That's a reason in itself to have them quashed. It just wasn't cost £50,000 for lawyers to go in to say that. I really don't know what the Stonehenge Alliance group are doing. I wish that they get more interested in the Constitution and the laws, and why it's important to explain about Magna Carta to them and those ancient liberties of London in Magna Carta, and how that law has been broken illegally. And then you realise, well, if that's been broken illegally, what about the other laws and things that have been withheld from us and so forth? But no one seems to be interested in it, showing an interest in it and learning about it, and then checking it with the current legislation. The thing with Stonehenge Alliance and all these archaeologists and academics is that they're all on modern acts and modern law, and now this is this is the way it's got to be done. It's got to be done how it says in this act and this and that. And you're like, well, no, I'm challenging the act. I'm challenging the act's legality and authenticity and whether it's in conflict with law. And even if there's modern acts which say that there's certain things you can have, like those local referendums and so many signatures, which we've already got those signatures anyway, equivalent to the numbers that you need. And it's the Secretary of State who is meant to authorise things like local referendums and things. It would be ridiculous having a local referendum in Wiltshire to quash those planning consents that were passed by Wiltshire Council when the government's already withdrawn the funding. Just seems ridiculous. And all these other acts of law, like the Local Government Act, which that is a modern act, they just don't seem interested in when you talk to them. It's just like, dude, just goes over the top of their heads, you know? And that's the least of his problems with everyone being affected by these consent, submit, accept entities which are taking over the country and steering behaviour. And that's what Larry Fink was on about at BlackRock, you know, behaviours, we're going to control behaviours. Well, what he's actually doing is changing the customs and actually not changing the behaviours. What he's trying to do is it's lobbying. Because if you consent, submit, accept to a certain behaviour which is beyond what your law says or encroaching on your law, and then you change your attitude, then you're changing whether the government make or change laws that you wouldn't agree to. So Larry Fink, what Larry Fink's doing and Bill Gates is they're lobbying us all for it, and it's you don't have action. They're making all their products and services, right? They're refusing to allow you to use their products and services unless you consent and submit to their policies and rules, which change behaviour, right? But they've bought up and purchased all of the available companies and resources, so they own them and they all run their policies. So you've got a little option left, and then they're influencing everyone else. And then they're changing your behaviour and they're changing your political opinion, right? And then when it comes to voting on whether, we should, why don't we stop these companies, or when it comes to the law, everyone's behaving to Bill Gates's rules. So then when the government say, oh, well, we're going to now change the law so you're not allowed to do all these things that the policy says, then everyone's used to it. This is illegal. This is criminal because foreigners, right, are having massive political lobbying on our country, but they've bought up our services that we use and access, and they're refusing us to use those services under English law unless we consent to their rules, which aren't the English law. And what's left? And they're also, that influence and effect passes on to other companies that they haven't yet bought. That there's something illegal about this. And the fact that the way to change it is through independent politics, independent candidates, petitions and so forth. And these big political parties, the one who are in the government, and these big political parties really are like companies, and there's no juries in there anymore who the actual people decide independently and that randomly shuffled on a lot of whether these companies can even buy things or build certain places. They remove that. I think that's against Magna Carta. I think that our military, there was this guy who said that he was ex-MI5 or whatever, or ex-security services, and he said that our Navy isn't allowed to do its job, apparently. There's all these immigrants coming in, and he's been watching it all and seeing that the Navy are just not doing anything when they should be using them employed to protect from unlawful immigration. Well, the Army's also allowing this to happen as well. And it's the diplomatic part of the Army, the non-weapons. You only use weapons when people don't do what you say, and then they use weapons if someone else gets a weapon out. But this is what the CIA are meant to do. It's intelligences, operatives, intelligence between but the CIA is meant to be only within its own country. The FBI is meant to be national of America, and the army is meant to be overseas, right? I think that our army is allowing what would be identified and recognized as a foreign country having a you're getting citizens to become kind of like American citizens in a way. In a way, it's like, you know, when you do the whole American palaver with the flag, you know, that whole saluting the flag thing. You know, we swear allegiance to the flag, blah, 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 blah. In a way, I think that all these Bill Gates and Larry Fink companies, when you're doing this policy on your phone, consent to submit, accept, it's almost kind of like swearing allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, but corporations and companies that are American as well, and their laws and rules. It's kind of like sworn in to another country, but you're in your own country that's got its own laws and rules, but your own government are kind of like, hey, this other country's pretty cool, let's all get sworn into it and like run it alongside our country, and then when everyone's used to it, then we'll just, you know, change our laws to be the same. There's an illegal part to this somewhere. I know there is. There's a treason somewhere in this with Tony Blair and Nick Clegg. And I don't care if Nick Clegg, you know, you wouldn't hit a man with glasses on or a Knight of the Realm. There's a part. This is illegal what they're doing, right? It is illegal because they're actually enforcing it within this country illegally. Those policies that say we can terminate your account for any reason or no reason at all, right? That's illegal. You can't have that. You can't even claim that you can have it. So that's unlawful, but they're getting everyone to consent to it. So legal policies in a country, and what it's actually doing is getting people to change their behaviour, and then they're buying up everything. So you've got no option. There's somewhere in the Magna Carta and the aliens and naturalization and the act of settlement and having, you know, it's somehow illegal, this, and it's just a matter of putting your finger on exactly what clause it is. But I think that a lot of these policies are illegal, and our Crown Prosecution Service aren't prosecuting them. They're saying it's civil. It's not actually civil. There are actually crime. There are crime. There's fraud. Well, that's fraud. It's a fraud. It's a fraud. It's a fraudulent statement. You know, it's like in privileges. You know, fraud or forgery. In that's forgery because you're making out that you can do it's lawful. So you're fraudulently. These companies are. They're engaging in fraud. They're making out that they're operating lawfully when they're not through policy, and policies affecting behaviour and conduct. And it's lobbying. It's in fact illegal lobbying, because when the policies are illegal and you're refusing to let people use the companies unless they consent to accept, swear allegiance to the flag, and it's affecting their behaviour in their voting and so forth, and they don't have any way to do anything except vote for these two major parties, which are all in on it, and there's no chance for any other parties to win independently, or very difficult. You can petition, but they've shut the petitions committee down online, and they're rejecting lots of petitions with making excuses up when you can actually have those petitions. And they've taken the independent juries out, which are shuffled at random, particularly in civil matters, which are whether these companies can build in the first place and exist and expand and even operate. When in Magna Carta, you're really supposed to be able to allow to have a jury on any matter, whether it's civil or criminal. We're being hustled big style, and you know, there's a lot of people played a part in it. Tony Blair, Gordon Brown with his Supreme Court. You know, where's the right to petition the House of Lords? Or more people doing it for appeal as well, which is quite simple. It's a constitutional thing, you know. All the Lords assembled, because they've all got different opinions. When you petition the Lords all assembled, and they're all like, you know, Tory, crossbenchers, Labour, Green Party, Lib Dems, and independent Lords, if you're petitioning the Lords, really, that's what you're petitioning. When they've only got 3 Lords in, how is it even covering all the different political parties in Democrats or even independents? Now, they're saying the law lords can't vote, right? But if those law lords can't vote, what would you rather have? 3 supposedly independent lords in a Supreme Court, which you've got to submit God knows what paperwork, and apparently you've had to have appealed it all in the other courts previously, or the right to petition the House of Lords with potentially being read out and them all voting on it, you know, whoever's, you know, a fair spread of assembly, which is meant to be the point, or a specialist committee on it or something, you know. But because a lot of people love this, all the TV and the movies and all these things that these companies are making, all these goodies, all these rewards and treats and so forth, they're just, they're kind of happy just to go along with it. Because, you know, while they're healthy and young, they don't see a problem. So other people who have got diabetes and been affected by, you know, the pandemic and so forth, who are now kind of woke up. And then some people are quite happy with, you know, the fast food and the culture, the unhealthy culture, but they're kicking off about ULEZ or 15-minute cities or Paper Mile. And other people are happy with, you know, they're not bothered about that, but they're kicking off about the fact that, you know, people want to take away their creature comforts and all this indulgence and so forth, which is causing all the bad health, you know, which all the television programs are all for it. That they're all for cooking programs, continuing Gordon Ramsay, the whole lot. You know, it really is a bit of a mess at the moment with and it's people who are willing to understand it and all the different aspects of what is going on and all the different groups which have a position and which are defending their own personal interest, but and then you've got Starmer who's just ploughing ahead. Oh, we're going to put Paper Mile in, we're going to do this and that, which is all for this big corporate agenda, which is not. It's not. We haven't asked for any of this. This is all these big companies who want to implement it, design how the world's going to be, implement their policies. A lot of it illegally. Consent, submit, accept. You haven't got any choice at all, and they pretty much own everything and have bought all the things that are implementing all this. It really is a bad deal for. It's a bad deal for the people who are meant to police each other, who are meant to be on juries and, you know, serve justice on their conscience and not be done by deals, deals for justice, deals for confessions in order to get more people convicted and admit their crimes through coercion. And if they can't get the evidence against them, then this police force must be rubbish. And this whole thing where the police force controls a monopoly of crime and no one can afford the extortionate prices of lawyers to pursue it privately now. And a lot of the lawyers have got a monopoly on the law as well and haven't been doing it properly, where rights aren't properly applied and exercised, and the law's not properly used to its full extent. Anyway, it really is a bit of a mess at the moment, but yet they're not. They really are still ploughing ahead and wanting to change things when people aren't really certain we should be doing certain things that the government are wanting to do. There really needs to be some kind of proper consensus on all things, some proper consultation, not consultation on the local council doing it, making it look or sound like it's a consultation, but they don't have to act on it. Whereas the actual jury that they do have to act on is only 12 people, that's a lot less than a consultation. And then where are all these local referendums that we're meant to be entitled to have that exist in law that not even Stonehenge Alliance even seems to be making use of? And now no one's... You can't even talk to these people. They don't want to listen because of the culture that the platforms have made. They're interested in the people they want to listen to, and anything else or anyone else, they're not interested in it. And you can't get their attention because there's too many other distractions now. You can't get the attention of the right people and get talking to them and get them to listen and help them explain and understand. And even if you do, there's all these top really highly overpaid lawyers who are on hundreds of thousands who actually aren't using the proper full extent of the law and are doing it in these set ways they've been taught to, arguing over ridiculous points which aren't the points that that you shouldn't be arguing over, and not using methods and actions which are a lot cheaper and easier, and also that exist. The academics are just on their own. They're just on their own, in their own rut. They're in their own kind of academic rut, and you don't seem to be able to shake them out of it with their attention.